Oh yeah, I need to pull up Streamplace too.
There we go. Oh, we need the link for the. Do we need the link for the talk proposals? For any last-minute proposals? Should have that to hand.
Oh, you're right.
Should have that to hand.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. There we go. A little bit of feedback there. Let me just rearrange a few things, and I will find those links. Hi, Dan. We're live.
Ted.
Happy New Year.
Yes, it's a new year.
Yes, same as the old year.
It's more intense. New Year extreme.
Yes. How were your holidays?
Ours were pretty good. They were quiet. We saw some friends. Actually, I say they were quiet. They were also slightly noisier than usual because we got one of our kids an electronic drum kit, which is quieter than a regular drum kit, but still loud because it requires you to hit things in the same way that you would hit a regular drum kit. But he's having a lot of fun with it, so that's good.
Yeah, amazing.
It is also right outside my office, so we've got negotiations about what happens after 3:30 when they get home.
Yep. Life with kids, man. We actually also got.
It's awesome.
Yeah, we got our little guy who's like not even 2 yet. Bluey drum kit, and so it both plays Bluey music, and also you can kind of hit it, and it's not a real drum kit, obviously.
Yeah.
But it is a suitable proxy, and it's like wild how crazy kids' toys are.
Yeah. Does it have an IP address?
It does not. This is one of those things about the current state of kids' toys and like the degree to which they integrate electronics in different ways, and like the fact that there are LLM toys for kids. On the one hand, is mind-boggling to me. On the other hand, I'm like, okay, actually, what's interesting to me about this is where are kids going to encounter LLMs, and that is not fully within our control. So that is a thing. Worth considering and talking about in terms of types of media literacy. Yeah. Hey, Patrick.
Is he back? Yeah.
Oh, did we actually
Patrick.
explicitly note that? Yes, welcome back, Patrick. Did we explicitly note that? Oh yeah, we're doing call-ins. Yeah, we're doing call-ins. Yeah, excited for chatting in the new year.
Oh right, yeah. Let's also say that.
You did say that we were doing call-in.
I said it to Ryan.
You also said it. We're doing call-ins today, so you can even come.
Okay, cool. Nice.
And there has been quite a lot of stuff that has happened since we last streamed before the holidays. And yes, remote procedure calls.
Yes.
Extreme remote procedure calls. Extreme remote. Let's see. What's the P? What RC?
XRPC. Cross.
XRCP. Yeah.
X is for cross.
No, we can do extreme.
Angry remote procedure calls.
Well, we need something else besides P calls.
Equals Republic of China.
That could just be protocols. Protocols is funny.
Hey, Ted.
What's up?
We've got a new. We've got an announcement.
We do.
Are we going straight into the announcement, or should we talk about some other stuff first?
Let's meander around for a little while. I mean, do we
Yeah.
want to catch up about all the stuff that's going on? I guess we can say we're running the media and civics track at ATmosphereConf, so we're going to be talking about that later on. Hey, Christian. I am currently paying attention to the comments primarily in Streamplace, although I suppose we should also pull up YouTube somewhere. YouTube. Okay, I've got it up somewhere.
Okay.
And
You look there.
yeah, new year, new edition of AtmosphereConf. Where's this background from? This background actually was from AtmosphereConf this past year, and so this is actually I think it was Denny Hall at the University of Washington campus, and so people who were able to attend the conference would essentially have this view if you're standing in the back, and it. Well, I mean, low-key, actually, this was not the room for the Unconf. The Unconf and the sessions that we had were in another room, and this was the main stage, which, we're probably likely to do, or I think we're likely to do again, since part of the goal for AtmosphereConf is not just, this is getting the community together, and we want to be able to discuss stuff that will move the atmosphere along and create, realize the potential that we've got here. That actually I could segue from that into some interesting things that have been happening, which is the thing I was going to call out was standard.site as an example of something that I've found fascinating to see come into existence. Let me pull that up.
Ooh.
Dan, have you actually had a chance to look at any of this?
Yes.
Okay.
5 seconds ago.
Yeah. This was a little working group that the teams up on screen kind of got together, and they, give me 2 seconds, they were able to kind of distill down some of the things that they want, that common elements from their lexicons and the ways that their platforms work, and say, hey, actually, we should just standardize around a single set of things that other people can use too, which I think is exactly the kind of behavior that you'd want to see out of having a shared data platform, which I think is super exciting. Yes, Jackie is mentioning the words that cannot be named. Yeah, and I think that this is kind of the thing about
where's Dorian?
Exactly. The things that people recognize about the way that AppProto and these other ecosystems work. Like, there are things that rhyme or reflect on ideas that people have explored before, and getting to see them in production, these sorts of tools in production, has been really exciting. And then also getting to seeing people tinker with them and build on top of them, that's actual traction, right? Which is, I think, the exciting part. So this is the first example of actually, I should ask, does anybody know of another lexicon that has a website made for it quite like this? Oh, there's Christian is adding Dorian. I have no idea if he's still in chat or not.
Just DM'd him. He's coming. He's on his way.
Yeah, and so I think it's cool actually talking about this, and this is sort of a thing that fires my data journalist brain, which is if you want people to use these things, use lexicons, one of the key elements for all of these things is making it legible and making it really easy to access and use. And so websites like this, I think, are great. And indicate a couple of things, which is, hey, this is an actively maintained thing. This is how we're going to maintain it. And here's who else is using it. And, this is even a space already where we've seen a little bit of attrition, because Whitewind, of course, was the first major blogging platform on Protocol. And it's now, unfortunately, unmaintained, I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And the author for Whitewind has said he's sort of stepped back from maintaining it. And we've seen other lexicons pop up in response to that, Greengale being one. And of course, there are other platforms that have been coming up around the space, including Leaflet, Pocket, and Offprint. So the fact that they're banding together to say, hey, actually, we'd like to be interoperable, is like exactly the thing that we want, right? It's amazing. So, yeah.
How do this is a dumb question. How do lexicons get versioned?
They Complicated topic. I think kind of in the way that so are you asking about the lexicon standard itself, or are you talking about lexicons individually
schema.
or both?
Individually.
Individually. Yeah, I think that's one of those things where lexicons as they currently stand are one of those things where you can't really modify them in post. You can append to them, or you can switch to other lexicons. But lexicons, once you kind of launch them out there, they're no longer your data, right? So they're going to be records out there with those shapes if you've deployed them. And this has to do with both the way that platforms or apps are supposed to use lexicons and the way that they do validation, and then also the way that you can deprecate and change lexicons. Nick Jarkinis, who I've got a thing that I want to talk about with that he released recently, has previously gone through this with smoke signal, for example, where he wanted to change the fundamental data type for smoke signal. And so the way that he did this was launch his new lexicon and then basically be able to promote any existing lexicon record into the new format. So when you logged in, it would actually take the old data, munge it into the new format, and then save a record of that.
And then write it back, and then append it to the right.
Yeah. Yes. And Tynan's already ahead of the ball here, which was, I was just mentioning Nick and Smoke Signal. Nick just released something super interesting, and this, I think, goes to the, how do people know what lexicons are out there? How do they find out what's in use? Who's using them, whether they're using them correctly. Hey Dorian, this is Jackie. Is that a surprise at how many lexicons there are? Because that seems about right. Why
not just make a new one?
Yeah. Oh no, there's way more. The bulk of the action on the network is definitely blue skies, but there are a lot of different lexicons out there. And one of the chaotic things about the space thus far, and this is one of the things that I saw with Microcosm, microcosm.blue. Microcosm has this constellation. Wait, is that the one I want? No, I want UFOs. Fig has created this really cool thing that has been around for a while, which is basically just listening on the relay and keeping all of the keys for all the lexicons so that you can kind of see some trend lines and so forth. And so they've been doing this since last year. And you can get some broad sense of things, but you could also go through and browse all of the collections. And if you do that, you get to see a bunch of things in here that are essentially garbage. And why is that? Well, everybody's PDSs are theirs and not ours. And whenever they can create whatever records they want in it. And when they do that, that blasts out onto the network for other people to observe. It's also just not super useful. And so there's a lot of garbage data that's worth filtering out. And some of these things aren't intended to be publicly valid, reusable schema like lexicons. They're just people toying around essentially with what they think is a key value store, which is where things like Lexicon Garden, I think, are really important for being able to bring some structure and form to how we might collaborate over lexicons and how we share things. So I think Standard Site is a really good example of saying hey, here's a way that some people are agreeing on how to do something and how we're going to band together to do that. But that's only for one type. How do we find other data types, and what other apps are out there using and putting lexicons out into the world? Things like Lexicon Garden are great because, and this literally launched this past week, so it's worth just taking a poke through and seeing some of these things. I think Nick has. Let's pick a good one. I don't know. Let's pick this one. Does this do anything? Does the graph do anything? No. Okay. We should find a good example of what Nick's got. Okay, no references. Can I list these by references? One of the fun things about this is basically if you want to actually take a look at the ways that these lexicons relate, you can actually get a little graph of which things refer to other lexicons, which I think is a little bit neat, even though I'm not offhand seeing a really great one to pick out. And we should just go back and look at Nick's posts, which is maybe where I should have started. Give me 2 seconds. Boop. I'll drag this into the window. All right. Yeah, he's got this example of the B-Sky feed posts that showed like where do all what other lexicon types does this thing point to and embed, which I think is neat. Now, the other thing is like I think this is a great example of things that'll move the ecosystem along, and helps to kind of give a sense of activity, and also is provides a discoverability mechanism. The other thing that Nick is doing with this is actually also indexing all of the lexicon types out on the network, that and he's using TAP to do that. TAP is, let me grab that too. Where'd it go? TAP was released last month, and it is basically a piece of infrastructure that allows anybody to go ahead and scan through the network and get all of the data from the network. And this addresses a couple of different things for the way that the network has worked thus far. The way that the architecture, I'll just do a really quick recap for folks. Most of the people on this call probably know, but for the VOD and everything, the way that AtProto works is your data is yours. It sits in your PDS, regardless of who runs your PDS. For most people, that's Blue Sky. But when you actually create new records, new posts or whatever, they get stuck in your PDS. When they get stuck in your PDS notifies the relay system. Your post gets sucked up in the relay system and gets shunted around, and whoever's listening to the network can hear that your post got created and go fetch that if they want to. So imagine that times 40 million. There are 40 million different accounts all firing off events, and that's all flowing through this large network where there are apps sitting on top. And when people want to see what's going on, those apps actually pull together the relevant data from the network. Maybe they've got a local index and they're sort of saving copies temporarily to present to their users when they want to view what's going on in the network. But that requires you to have the infrastructure to actually go scan through the network. And the way that Blue Sky's relays used to work was they actually kept a record of all of the things that had ever been pushed through the network. So you could actually rewind all the way back to the first message that had ever happened through the relay network. They're not doing that anymore. Their newer release keeps a cache window, which I think is 3 days. I don't remember off the top of my head. But that also meant that other people who wanted to plug into the network and get a look at the raw data needed to do other things. And that actually meant going scanning through all of the data in the PDSs. So Blue Sky's released this thing, TAP, which helps do that. And what's kind of cool about that was just released last month. That's what's backing Lexicon Garden at this point, and it actually is a piece of infrastructure that has allowed Nick to go and scan the entire network to pull out all of this data and help make sense of it. So I think that is a fun example of a permissionless collaboration, I guess, and sort of building on the work of other people. Yeah. So I think that's
nice.
Cool. Yeah,
it is.
Other things that are going on. Boop. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the neat things that. Well, have you noticed? We can talk about media and civic stuff now, or other lexicon things. What else is here and exciting that people would like to talk about? Oh yeah, here's the post actually.
Oh cool. Yes, it's up now.
We haven't published it yet, so and unfortunately I don't have access to the publish.
Why don't you read it out? You could read it out.
Okay. Hi, We're Dan and Ted. We're organizing the Media and Civics track at ATmosphereConf 2026. And submissions to speak are currently open. The App Proto community came together at ATmosphereConf 2025 last year in Seattle for a blend of conversations that included network protocols, data and infrastructure, but also community building, social media, and society. Discussion and action over the public's control of online digital spaces is critical to how we function as a society. We're reflecting on that importance this year with a new track for media and civics. 2025 brought media and platform consolidation to new depths. Arbitrary top-down control concentrated in the hands of a few companies was exercised quite frequently. Even so, last year saw the creation of new software apps and communities pointing to new ways for the public to engage and interact. For example, independent and co-op media companies continue to grow, and publishing platforms like Ghost and WordPress launch tools to connect to the atmosphere and the Fediverse. Companies like Verge and SB Nation have launched new features to engage their audiences and host social communities on their infrastructures. And we're seeing new apps enter beta, like New Public's Roundabout, which are designed to give local communities healthier ways to connect. And one of the other exciting things about the atmosphere is seeing more cities, municipalities, and government agencies come online and start to engage in the atmosphere. The National Weather Service, for example, has been running an experiment on the platform, which has been fun to see. And so, we're looking for folks who are interested in talking about the ways that social media has changed for them in the past year, and ways that they would like social media to be different in the way that they're engaging their communities, and how that can be reflected in our digital and online spaces. So we're excited to run this track and interested to see, one of the things that excites me about working in the atmosphere and in this community is that it's not just about tech, importantly it is, and users are not either an afterthought or external entities to be moved. And so, the extent to which this really is a community about what are we doing for ourselves and each other, I think is really critical and important. And the sets of conversations that we should be having about the way that we interact and engage with each other.
I think so. So we were talking about this yesterday. Ted and I have been talking about this track for a very, very long time now, trying to get as sharp as we can on what we're trying to achieve with it and why we think it's important. I think one of the things that we realized yesterday was that it is not just about the technology part of it. So it feels like last year was really great in terms of bringing developers together. We also had some great talks from Rudy and from Erin about, I would say, very much the social part, and Blaine Cook, for example, on about what we've learned over the last 20 years of social media. But I think that the thing that we have started to identify is that there is the technical part, but there's also the social part, and the way that technology is embedded in the rest of our daily lives. So that includes stuff like government regulation, that includes stuff like what are the real platform economics out there, what are the economic situations that new applications and protocols and platforms live in, what do they need to compete against to be able to get traction, and all of that, at least from my point of view, from our point of view, involves the participation of everything from bottom up, new institutions and new organizations like indie media, like the great stuff that we've been seeing from indie media organizations, all the way through to what Ted's been talking about, like Vox and the Verge and SB Nation, in terms of how they are, you can think of them as a legacy media or practically institutional media right now. So how do we get their participation in this so that we get bottom up and we also kind of get top down participation in building this out, which is a long way of saying that we want, at least for me, part of the intent for this is to get some of the early 2000s excitement back around getting creative technologists and passionate technologists into contact with people who can influence ultimately the money whether that's commissioning or developing new products and platforms inside existing services and or funding brand new ones. So, fully recognizing that a lot of the failure mode of the mid 2000s was all the ZERP brand money coming in and getting thrown at people.
Yeah.
But at least for me, one of the realities is that it takes money, which goes into time and effort, to develop the software and the protocols that we're going to use. And also we need paths for people to use them, and cooperating with or persuading existing ecosystems is part of that. Oh, I was talking about yesterday, like, what would it be like? Would it be interesting, modulo the fact that the New York Times are the New York Times, but what would it be like to get some of the developers or PMs behind New York Times puzzles along to Atmosphere? Just because that is a big vector for getting use of the protocol and getting awareness of the protocol up.
I mean, we could get Parker. Parker has not disclosed this yet, but I found out that he has moved into a puzzle editor role at a non-traditional publisher.
Yeah. So who was it? So Tynan mentioned, can we get Neil A? I think Neil A is definitely on our want list.
Yeah.
There are there's other ones. So I think it's also kind of like a combination of baby steps. Like, there are a lot of ideologically aligned media organizations that we would love to have, like NPR, like ProPublica, like 404, like Aftermath, and so on, all the way through to, it would be interesting if we got some of the bigger, larger, lumbering ones that admittedly have already made some signs of participation, like, the Washington Post, the BBC did a really great, well-scoped experiment with Mastodon and ActivityPub that they did some great stuff with. So at least for me, I want to get people excited, and I want to bring the rest of the world in as well.
Yeah. Should we take... I think it's going to be a really good time, and being able to highlight the set of conversations and where we want to steer everything to collectively is going to be really good, especially in the context of the sort of formative energy that we had last year, and I think that we're going to continue to have this year.
Yeah, so Jackie's got this question: what is it that these larger organizations tend to need to see outside of line goes up to convince them to stick around? I don't. So the particular kind of people that I'm looking for, that my gut is looking for, are not necessarily the line goes up people. They need to have some sense of line go up to be able to justify it to their senior leadership. But what I would really like, the hypothesis that I would really like to... I'm echoing. How am I echoing? That's weird. Is this any better? No? Yes? Maybe. Ted, am I echoing for you?
Nope.
Okay. Weird.
Okay. Somebody's audio is doubled. Well, let's close some stuff and see what happens. Or maybe I just need to talk more, and that'll actually squelch the issue.
Just me.
Yeah. Okay. No. What's happening is I'm not wearing headphones, so maybe it's sort of picking you up. So I will mute myself when I'm not talking. How's that?
My hypothesis is that if we have got great tech demos about how building new, interesting, useful stuff is easier and faster on AppProto, that PMs at organizations can be easily persuaded are good for their product, or for them to try new and interesting stuff out in the here's a new interesting thing for us to incorporate that's going to have like minimal lift. Like, I think that's one of the things that I'm interested in is how can this also feel a bit like a WWDC or a developer conference or a developer advocacy conference. It's like, here's this new stuff, here are real practical demonstrations of what they can do for products, and this is how easy it is to integrate, or this is how easy it was to build it. because for those of you, for those developers or for those platform builders who are building stuff, I want to make it as it's kind of like I want it to be as easy as possible to bring you customers and partners.
Yeah, and I think that's one of these things. Rudy, I think, is really calling this out. The thing I've paid attention to most over the past year is who's starting new things, who is trying to integrate existing ecosystems, and I think that there's still a lot of work to do here. And who needs to be invested to do what sort of work, right? So what's the gap that needs to be closed that would actually enable that sort of like step function behavior change? And so I think that like Ghost integrating ways to post to ActivityPub and Blue Sky through Bridgie is like a good step, but that's not like that doesn't seal the deal for me. I think that both of those integrations for WordPress and for Ghost don't quite get to the thing, like the good stuff inside of AppProto. But what's important to think about is these organizations, whether it's 404 Media or other folks who are using Ghost, have done an integration and are currently engaging with their audiences in a particular way. So what are the things that are actually going to make a difference in their life in terms of different types of integrations or new things that could be built that would help them serve their business? Ultimately, we do need it's not so much like optimize line go up, but like actually investing time in these spaces and these ecosystems needs to have a positive return for people, and helping people frame that, or again figure out what gaps need to be closed in order to solve that, is really the critical thing that we're talking about. And line go up doesn't necessarily mean like money necessarily, and I think it's really interesting to think about other entities and orgs like the National Weather Service, right? Like, what do they ultimately want? Conversations I've had with them in the past have been about, well, the thing that's really critical for them is being able to reach audiences that they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach in a hurry. Because what they really want to make sure is that nobody gets hurt, or if there are urgent weather bulletins, that they get out to the correct people. And so their interest ultimately is in reach. It's not mass reach. It's actually sort of like accuracy of fit, I think, is an interesting sort of question. And then also, organizations like the government of Boston, or folks who are running campaigns, right? They're trying to reach particular constituencies, and the extent to which AppProto can help do that, and you can do more focused outreach and things like that, is really, I think, important.
So let me give you an example with Boston, because it ties a few things together for me. So Boston are being very forward thinking by coming on to Blue Sky more than AppProto in the way that they have. So it's not just the mayor of Boston. It's they've gone through in pretty much all of their departments. If I think back to 2000 to the mid 2000s, then that's when brands and ad agencies, I'm sorry for mentioning them, that's when they would start to want to be on social platforms because they don't want to miss out. But what they really needed was integrated tools that would help them publish to multiple places.
Yeah.
All right. So one example might be, if why would a CRM, for example, for a major multinational corporation be interested in Blue Sky? Well, they might not be, but if the cost of that integration for the platform that they use to manage that CRM is super, super low, then maybe that CRM integrates it and they're able to say, hey, here's a checkbox, you can publish to Blue Sky as well. Like, it's integrated into your workflow. You don't need to manage something else. So I want to talk to Boston because I have a sneaky suspicion that Boston are just using whichever client, and they don't have, I suspect that they may not be using an integrated social media publishing client, and they're just doing it off their own backs, or they have some other way of doing it. If Boston are having a good experience, I want it to be as easy as possible for Boston to say to another city, hey, this works for us, plus it's really easy, just go do this thing.
Yeah.
It should be even easier for the next city to do it than Boston. And if it was easy for Boston, then, Patrick is asking, do they have their own PDS? Then the next step is, how can Boston are into it. If they're getting return on it, or if they even think that it is a societally useful thing to do, and we think it is also societally useful for them to have their own PDS, then that's a way to talk to Boston about Posky, right? For Boston to publish to their own and then syndicate elsewhere.
Yep.
So it's those steps of how do we make it as easy as possible, and not just telling, but by showing. showing how easy it is, showing how low the cost of integration is. Because I think the case, it's a different case in so many different contexts. You can talk to cities and governments and say, this is actually your institutional remit. It's why you exist, and you have to be doing this.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, Tynan, that would be that. That's exactly the same idea. Is to get an idea. Boston are kind of like your first user. Find out what they need. Find out what would help them be even more successful. Build it for them. Maybe you've even got a business. Maybe you've even got a SaaS product there, right?
Yeah.
Or if you want, you've got one that you can sell to someone else and then have them in-shitify.
Yeah. Yeah. We should open this up to questions and callers.
Yeah.
And anybody who's interested in joining, feel free to fire up Zoom. I just dropped it into the Streamplace chat, and we will take callers. The thing that I want, this comes back to the line go up piece and what's the incentive for people to integrate App Proto. And when I was primarily focused on Fediverse, infrastructure and talking with journalists and journalism organizations, I really had this taxonomy in mind of why do people participate in social media? And the question was not, do news organizations need an alternative to their Twitter strategy? It really was a question of, do they need a Twitter strategy at all, right? Why are organizations on this platform? What do they get out of it? And for me, one way you can think about this is, having a Fediverse, a presence on the Fediverse was do you want to run a server? If you do that, you're on the hook for all of these trust and safety issues and community moderation and these pieces in a particular type of way. Or you could run an account on somebody else's server. Or you can run your own server. Sorry, I got the order wrong. You could run a server and allow anybody on, in which case you've got a lot of trust and safety issues. You could run a server that's only for the people who you have some way to bind in some other way, and that way it's not a trust and safety issue. Really what you've got is an HR issue. Whoa, did Dan disappear? Dan, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. That's the first time that's happened in forever.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you're
it
also
just died.
Wild. Okay. I was going through and saying you can have a server, run it yourself, and invite your audience to it, which is chaos, potentially. But if you've got the chops for it, you can handle it. Great things can happen. You could run a server and only allow people who you can fire if you need to onto your server, in which case there's some guarantee of decent behavior, and then you could just run an account on somebody else's server like Mastodon.social. But at that point, right, ultimately your relationship between this type of social media is not actually that different than being on Threads or being on X, etc. It's just a different set of rules, or you could just not engage. And so thinking about how do people want to engage in the atmosphere, there are some dynamics that are slightly different. Running a PDS is different than running a full Mastodon server, for example, which is what the FT tried this and then decided it was a terrible idea and they didn't want to do it. But again, what's in it for each of the groups? And a lot of these news organizations rely on X and Threads essentially to soak up the cost of doing trust and safety. And so although there's a contentious relationship there is a sort of reciprocal thing going on that is worth recognizing. Just catching up on chat here. And so one of the other exciting things about the atmosphere, though, is it's not just microblogging. And I think this is where having things like Streamplace is important, where it's important to have things one of the things I think is particularly cool about the way that Boston.gov has been doing things is they've got the live indicator that gets badged anytime their YouTube channel goes live. That is a piece of ambient awareness and starts to glue together something that is more than just we have a presence on this app. And so that gets to your thing about what is actually the ecosystem of services and communications that governments or news organizations or not-for-profits need in order to serve the audiences that they are trying to reach.
One massive example might be GTFS, so the transport standard for describing public transit routes
Oh,
and live. So that was an unofficial. I can't remember. I don't even think that came from Google in the first place. I think that maybe came from a city, and then Google decided to use it because it was there, and then now it's a de facto standard. Um, so that kind of so nowadays that's a thing that could be punted onto or available on that proto. You can inherit the existing schema for it and then turn that into a lexicon. For example, it's that kind of thing that I think that's an example of the thing that I think could be useful, or at least a demo in that way. And again, it's that idea of how do you make it as easy to adopt as possible. It's easy for us to think about, right, you should be here, but if the cost of being here is administering yet another system, it's like, I'm old enough now to not want to administer another system. If I'm paying for something, then I would love that feature to be in the thing that I'm already paying for now. I would prefer it, not to be that way, given that I'm probably paying for a really shit thing. But also, I think that's a kind of pragmatic stepping stone.
yeah, yeah, and I think some of this gets to the like, what is the mental model, the mode of engagement that folks have with these spaces. And I always talk about how Blue Sky is ultimately a skeuomorphism, but if people only see the front end of the skeuomorphism and they stay there because that is convenient for their operations, then fundamentally nothing changes, and you're also comparing then Blue Sky specifically to Threads or Instagram or these other spaces, which have much larger audiences. So if we're talking about differentiators in terms of space, like, how do we get there? What are the things that we need to do?
Yeah, honestly, one of the things would be, and I would be interested in seeing, what the capital B brands are doing to publish onto Threads in the first. Like, clearly, Facebook can do a lot of outreach and then just throw money at them to publish onto Threads, and they're clearly publishing on Facebook anyway. But it is that if we want to see more stuff, just more even Blue Sky posts, then how do we make that as easy as possible?
Yeah, and yes, there's a bunch of interesting product conversations to have there.
Yeah,
and I'll talk about, like, I think people need to remember Threads is Instagram fundamentally, and uses the same recommender infrastructure and all those sorts of pieces. So there are people who are having a good time on Threads, and there's plenty of activity on Threads. It's very Instagrammy.
So maybe here's another example, because I feel like we keep forgetting to talk about how dominant TikTok is as a publishing platform.
Yep.
Or at least you keep reminding me that we keep forgetting that it's not really text. We had this, the discourse on Blue Sky was about this the other day. It's like, if you actually want to influence people, then maybe you should be doing video as well as text, or video instead of text. And then Jamal Bowie kind of, I think, got a bunch of shit for that, for people who write really well. Anyway, I don't know if people remember when suddenly there was suddenly everything had video in it. Like, LinkedIn suddenly had video in it, in the way that everything had stories in it. That was it. Like, we had Instagram stories, and then we had the stories came from Snapchat. And for some reason, LinkedIn needed to be less professional. So suddenly stories were in everything.
Yep.
And if stories, and using that example, if video stories are a thing, then does it make sense? Like, how is our proto better for that? Like, because it might not be, but if it is that proto a way to make that way easier and faster for people to integrate into their products?
Yep. I just put the Jamel Bowie thread up on screen for folks, right? Let me get that out of the way. I have said this before, but if you are actually interested in influencing people beyond a narrow circle of 2 online journalists, you will be making direct-to-camera videos on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. If you primarily post on text-based social media, then you're just dicking around. To be clear, it's fine if you want to dick around. That's mostly what I do here. But the idea that you're giving up the fight to influence people by not using X is belied by the fact that effectively no one uses X. I don't see any of the use X people on TikTok or YouTube. And that's absolutely correct. And in fact, we're fucking doing it right now, right? We're also posting to YouTube. Granted, although not that we've optimized that particularly well. But I think that this is really one of the things of, like, I should grab that other post that I posted about a minute ago, which was this post from October that was basically talking about the convergence of social media towards TV. And I think that's right. And noted over the summer to Blaine Cook that, like, you shouldn't get mad at Instagram for not being a social network where you see stuff from your friends, because that's not what it's for. It is a replacement for television. And yeah, it was DK Tomps who noted that there's this like broader convergence actually of media towards things being television-like in a sort of passive consumption experience, and also being able to cycle content through, whether that's TikTok, whether that's Reels. And it's worth thinking about what the Ellison family is trying to do in terms of acquiring both TikTok and other media brands into a single experience. Yeah, Dorian is dialing in.
Hey.
Let me hit up OBS. We could put Dorian back on screen, but Dorian, I need to get the... there we go. I got that out of the way. I can make Dorian a little bit bigger. Dorian, you are still muted.
A wider thing is, because we're talking about Instagram in the chat, is like, I would like to believe that there are attributes about Instagram as a platform that tend creators towards shittiness. And I would like to believe that there are inherently good things about the design of that proto that can, at the very least, help nudge people away from shittiness, especially in terms of being able to support different types of content recommendation algorithms. Or I guess our proto is neutral in that way.
Yeah, I've got like 3 opinions about that. And I don't think that this place is immune from shittiness. The question is, what can you do about it?
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Dorian. You're muted again.
Yeah, I muted myself because I couldn't tell how much echo was happening yet. You know what? And the damn microphone is not on the right. It never likes the right one. It's on my lab now. You should be able to...
Yeah, we can hear you.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, I was summoned here. But you guys are talking about something different now, so I would say continue with that.
It's a Colin show. Hit us with what you got.
Oh, I mean, I was just sort of thinking of like what you were sort of saying about the importance of, or just like, you know, the fact that stream place is important, and just like the fact that you know, like having like heterogeneous stuff, I think is like, as opposed to like, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I was talking to Christian in particular about this, insofar as like the identity, like, I mean, he was mainly running with this, but I mean, I used to work with do a federated identity stuff like 20 years ago, and like, you know, like people obviously, I mean, there's like the identity gangs mailing list, like people have been talking about this forever, and like the idea of being able to like log in with stuff, like log in with a decentralized, or not, you know, decentralized, whatever, right? Federated, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, you know, we've got login with Facebook and login with Google and login with Apple now. So we've got, like, we call it the NASCAR page.
It's
right?
done.
Sorry?
It's done.
Yeah, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
But, like, the idea...
Like, it could be better, but it's done.
Well, the thing is, I mean, obviously, like, your identity is going to be tied to, you know, to one of the oligopoly, you know, mega corps in that regard. You know, it'll be your iCloud account, and you got a relationship with this particular entity in perpetuity, and so on and so forth. I mean, like, the startup that I worked at 20 years ago, like, that was like absolutely their play. Like, they were like, we're going to get all the users, and then we're going to own the thing. And it's like, okay, whatever. But, like, you know, they are like not even a footnote in history. Like, they are fully gone. Like, I think there's like barely anything even about them online anymore. But when I sort of thought about like the actual technical problem, is like, okay, like you've got like, you know, everybody's got a budget of like a tiny little piece of profile data that they can cart around, it may be totaling like 50K of information or something like that, and that's being generous. Gravatar was also from that era as well, right?
Still exists.
And the idea, sorry,
It
still exists.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I always see it, on the. I always see it happening on the other aspects of the. It sort of pops up every once in a while. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. There's me from 15 years ago, but like just the bare idea of like having arbitrary amounts of storage, like in a PDS somewhere, wherever it is, okay, and then of course it's not tied to any particular vendor, which is also freaking awesome. And it's like yes, and you can move it around if you just if you have a disagreement. Or you just you want to move on from that relationship, and and I think that like that mechanism, like the lack of that mechanism, I think when I think about just platforms in general, people have been inured, they've basically been trained to just assume, when you hear at the end of the podcast, like, oh, it's Apple and iTunes and Spotify and, like that kind of a thing. And it's like that's the standardiest standard you can get, right? Like podcasts are like still the like most non-proprietary thing, more or less, that everybody actually uses. But like it's by pure force of will and bait and switch that it's been sort of like people have sort of inured to platformize that kind of a thing. And I think that it's just like Masnick, and I might have written something a few years prior to that, but the whole protocols over platforms business, I think there's a little enough of a toehold of people that understand the value of that. There's a lot of people out there who understand, like in absolute terms. In relative terms, it's still a tiny sprinkling of people. But like there's enough people that you're going to get a person at a party who's going to corner you and talk about this stuff, right? Which I don't think just even there was enough prior to that. So that's new, I think. But I guess like I don't know, like like what you were saying about the like, oh, it looks like Twitter and it's just the new thing, there's no real difference. But it's like the fact that like it's going to be very interesting when there is like reusable data on PDSs that, oh, I took it from here and I used it over there. Like that's going to be really interesting. Like whoever does like the flicker of or whatever, whoever does the flicker of app proto, I don't know. I'm sure somebody's done that or is doing it.
Yeah, Grain exists.
IMDb, right? IMDb or something like Letterboxd, right? So if you had something like IMDb, then it would be easier to build a whole bunch of letterboxes or things that comment. So I thought that one of my pet things about this is, what are the objects that what are the things that people agree around for social commentary? Because that's one way to think about products and services. So you brought up Flickr. So Flickr is the thing, I take a photo and then other people look at the photo and then comment and they want to embed the photo elsewhere. The thought that I had was about stuff like TV shows and TV episodes and films, because you want, like, ideally you have one canonical or as few canonical URLs or DIDs to an episode of a TV show, and then everything else can reference that, and then you can hydrate it in whichever way that you want.
The BBC did that like 15 years ago they did it with RDF, and they had like a TV show thing. I think Paul Risson was part of that.
Yeah.
And they just like nuked all of that. Like BBC just like nuked all of their linked data stuff. It's just fully gone.
Yeah, so I think that's one of those things, right? Like, we're three old dudes talking about stuff that we were present for and experienced in part, and I think it's worth actually talking about some of the details of what the mindset was also at the time. Because, I mean, like, Gravatar is a great example, right? Like, Gravatar and a whole bunch of services, the idea was somebody will solve this problem, it will be so cheap to run that they will just do it forever. And that was the sense of open culture for Flickr, and we got cultural institutions to put all their shit up on Flickr, and everybody was like, oh, somebody else will eat the costs for this, and that's both not true over time, and you're also giving control over all of that stuff to somebody else, right? And that's one of the things that I think is interesting about the PDS structure, and the idea of, like, you can actually put stuff in a thing that you ultimately have control over, and actually it will still behave like social media that everybody else expects. That's actually the thing that I think is important, but that's a long game. And the question is, what are the short-term incentives that make that better, that are important to see happen, and that actually do still succeed and differentiate in the market when compared to the resources that, like, Threads has. Or, again, I think Jamel Bouie's thing is correct, right? We should be thinking about short-form video. That is actually the way that most people are consuming media.
Yeah. And Eli, in that regard, like, he seems to be doing a lot of work around just, like, the problem of blob storage and streaming video and, like, chopping up video and storing it and like, basically, like, making video PDS friendly. That seems to be a thing that he's all about, which is, like, absolutely, what I mean? I am sure, like, if, it's interesting too, because it's like, okay, like, Blue Sky, I'm sure was like, fine, we got to, I mean, I don't know and have any visibility into them. I met Jay Graber, like, at a dinner once. I can't imagine them being like, oh yeah, we really super want to do video. We want to think about that. It's like, it's more like, people demand, it's like the same thing with private accounts, right? Like, that reads to me like a consummate pain in the ass as far as a protocol is concerned. Like, just knowing what I know about that kind of stuff and having to, like, kind of deal with it myself in other contexts. Like, good grief, like, it's like the 402 payment required HTTP error code. Like we're gonna put this here, but, like, we have no freaking idea. Like, we are not gonna hinge this protocol on trying to figure that out, because that is, like, a monster problem. And so similarly too, like, and it's funny too, because, like, talking to you've seen people complain about, like, private accounts regularly, and it's like, you're hurting us and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, do you have any clue just how freaking hard it is? Well, Twitter could do it. Yeah, Twitter could do it because it's a monolith. Twitter could do it because they are the entire infrastructure, so of course they can freaking do it. Like, the whole thing about moving data to another administrative jurisdiction boundary, you lose control over it, and like that to me, in my just professional sphere, dealing with people who aren't professional software developers or very close adjacent to that, like, there are facts about the way that information works that, like, transcend information technology. Like, they would have made the same, it's like, if this person talks shit about that person and it gets back to them, like that. Those are the kinds of dynamics that you learn on in elementary school, right? But, like, for some reason, when you introduce computers into the mix, it's like, all of that understanding just, like, vaporizes, and people are like, their computer says whatever. And it's just like, I really, like, if I had, like, one wish, like, if I, if a genie materialized and I said, can you just make the entire world understand this one thing? Like, just this one thing. I just want this one thing for people to understand. And what would the world be like if that was the case? I think, like,
yeah, but Facebook, I think, like, I take this from stuff that Quinn Norton said years ago, which is, like, actually kids threat model really well. And, like, the kids these days understand the environments in which they're growing up at an intuitive level. And I don't mean that they are digital natives and all that sort of stuff. I just mean they live in a landscape with other humans and understand the ways in which they are engaging with other people and some of these things. And that's true. I think that some of this stuff changes, and some of it is about actually active myth making on the parts of people who write about this stuff, right? I mean, like, the fact that we talk about AI the way that we do is functionally Sam Altman's victory over framing in the press and all these sorts of things, right? Like, these are I don't mean that in a conspiratorial way, but like these are socially constructed understandings of the way that we should engage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the case of like something that has sort of become really obvious to me in the last, I don't know, maybe decade, maybe not quite decade. I haven't really put my finger on like just how long. I mean, yeah, no, let's call it a decade. Is the transition of the sort of like the PRification of software and just basically information system companies. Like, I don't want to say tech companies because I can't stand the idea that there is an industry that manufactures technology. I think that's just a dumb framing, but that's just my pathology. But just the PRification of, like, you know, venture capital, for example, like Andreessen, like, is just a freaking PR firm that happens to give out money, you know. Like, it's like what seems to have happened with his firm in particular is like, I have an ideological project. I'm going to fund things that are my ideological project, but I'm going to front load that with, like, it's time to build, you know, like, it's,
sure.
And I think that seems to be what seems to be new about that is like they seem to be very, very deliberate about maxing out sorry, I just got distracted. They seem to be maxing out like the dialing in of it. Like they seem to be like very, very getting very efficient at it.
Yeah,
I guess, is what I'm seeing.
But I mean, like, the thing that I would say is, you know, I could flip that around, right? They think that attention is valuable, and they are weaponizing it effectively. And the technology is a leverage point, and they're using it accordingly. So, yeah. But I mean, like, all more to the point, just to bring it back to the media and civics stuff, right? Like, what exactly is it about the dynamics of information technology and the ways that we're connecting that we want to preserve, and what are ways in which we want to respond to how things should be different, or what are the modalities that we really need to reach people in mass? Because again, Blue Sky is currently the most popular app on AppProto. I would say everybody else is kind of a rounding error, as much as I love quite a lot of the services that are on here. We need to see what the next breakout on AppProto is going to be. It's got to make sense. And then also, we need to think about how this reaches quite a lot more people. If we think about, I mean, like, my whole thing here is AppProto is actually a scalable technology that you could build city-sized or nation-state-sized services on top of, or global services, in a way that, like, I don't think you can do that for the Fediverse. And, you know, I think over time some of that stuff is going to change, and the infrastructure in the Fediverse will also respond to the conditions that we've got on the ground. But, like, none of that means anything until somebody actually starts to build those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you, Dorian. I think we might kick you off at this point. And
No worries.
No, thank you for joining us. I mean, it's always interesting to have you on and to chat about this stuff. And this was one of the things that I really enjoyed about ATmosphereConf last year, which was being able to both reflect on where things have come and say, what are decisions that we could do differently? And so having context around what had happened in the past is, I think, extremely useful. Happy and excited to have other thoughts, callers, questions, things that people want to know about the Media and Civics track. How broad are we thinking? The scope for that really is news media, civics. The community infrastructure piece, I think, is important too, including things like trust and safety tools. I would love to get some of the folks in the energy from communities like the trust and safety professionals or the trust and safety research conference that happens every year at Stanford. Because functionally speaking, like trust and safety is a type of governance over the online spaces that we're operating in.
Tina's got a question, which is what our vision is for civic media on the Atmosphere. And I don't know if this is dodging the question or not, but the way that I think about it is, what's the vision for civic media in the first place? Because the way that Ted and I've sometimes talked about it on this podcast is, well, what kind of society do we want in the first place? And then does the technology, all the way from the primitives to the tools to the platforms, how good a job are those technologies doing meeting our vision for a society, and then doing it that way around first, rather than what's increasingly the case, especially in the US, which is, well, our vision for society is a bunch of people make a lot of money and extract it from other people, and then we will build the technology to do that. That's maybe.
I mean, I'd say it's more cynical than that. And the two things I'll point out are local, and local to me actually currently, which is why does Nextdoor exist and why do people pay attention to it? Well, what they've done is Nextdoor is largely a cesspool of sociopathic sort of neighborhood watch types and some government posting local information to it. And then functionally buy nothing groups. But Nextdoor, I think, did a very concerted job of trying to get local information officers, public information officers, onto Nextdoor to post there so that there was a reason to go visit. So that is a sort of perverse incentive structure there. I think another example that's been happening has been Flock, which...
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, so for folks who aren't familiar, Flock is a digital surveillance company that sells to police departments. And not just police departments, also private citizens.
Anyone you want, yeah.
So if you want to set up a local surveillance infrastructure for you and your neighborhood watch, you can do that. And in fact, people in my neighborhood have been doing that. But the thing is that they have a particular mechanism for being able to engage these civic organizations that leverage the particular features and not necessarily virtuous dynamics within those ecosystems. So for example, in Oakland, there's quite a lot of protests against elected leaders, and the Flock proposals got shot down in the committees that they were proposed through, until the police department came through and said, no, we need this. And so Oakland is now arguing, and this is going to move into the courts. But this is the dynamics that we have in terms of the product ecosystem and how they engage with the public and their elected officials, which I think is the complicated part.
So a way that I've got about thinking about this as well is to, this is after over a decade of civic tech, and also I think my personal bias here, which is I would like to, it's easier to start to think about, I would like a more informed populace, but I also really want to think about, well, what is it that they need in the first place rather than a top down. So it is interesting that buy nothings have kind of cropped up, especially in the recent years, because I do think it's a response to shit getting really expensive and then people wanting to find ways to get the things that they need, and self-organizing on whichever are the easiest platforms to them, which right now happen to be Facebook groups. So I'd look at it much more from a need point of view.
Yeah.
So there's one way of looking at it, which is the next time someone starts a buy nothing group, is it going to be easier? And it's not going to be just in terms of growth, right? Because everyone is already on Facebook. But can we make it even easier than it is right now to start a buy nothing group somewhere else? Right, and to make that choice, which comes into a product design question, which comes into all of that stuff. But I think for the purpose of AtmosphereConf, it's well, what is the technology that will make it as easy as possible for someone to build an easier to use alternative to a buy nothing group? So there's stuff
Nextdoor is fucking horrendous. They partnered with the equivalent of ShotSpotter, right, in my neighborhood, and they pushed a notification to my device because I accidentally left them on, saying, "Hey, we think we heard a gunshot near you, right? Here's where people are talking about it." And I'm like, I don't fucking like. Great. Now I have to hear about a gunshot near me. And then within about 5 minutes, all the comments were, "Yeah, that was just a car backfiring." Um, and I completely agree that all of these are going to be, they may converge on some of the best, easiest to use software products and services, but I don't think they have to. And I would like to see, the technologies and the protocols that support choice and that support autonomy, so that if there is a different product or service or just way of doing it that works for one community over another community, then that is easy to use and it can still interoperate. Like, I'll give you an example with government procurement, right? So City of Portland buys stuff. County of Multnomah buys stuff. The metro area, they're all distinct entities and they buy stuff. They have different supplier lists. They have different ways for suppliers and local businesses to engage with them. So when the City of Portland puts out an RFP and says, "Hey, we need, a whole bunch of fence painters to paint a bunch of fences," they can't automatically also, just draw in the same way that the FBI or law enforcement can just draw a boundary and say, "I want to reach all of the fence painters in this region." They cannot do it because all of this stuff isn't in a consistent schema and it's in different siloed platforms. So I see that, and being able to build on fundamentally open platforms to allow for that collaboration and to allow for that interoperability. And ShotSpotter just, honestly doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think that gets to a couple of different things, which is, and what this is reminding me of is we need, I keep on stressing that we keep on needing other concepts of the way that we could organize stuff. And it's true that digital life is not organized the way that municipal or governance is structured fundamentally, which is one of the big impedance mismatches. But also another way to frame some of this is, there's been a large sort of interest focused or scale focused capture of services, right? And so you don't get certain local mixes and milieus that you would even if you've got these different government entities overlapping on top of each other. And local is a potential way for services in AppProto to grow. I think that the Buy Nothing group is an example of extremely local, ultimately a thing that is a practice as opposed to a service. And in fact, one of the things that the people who started Buy Nothing wanted to be able to steer the community and grow it, but it was entirely captured within Facebook. So they launched their own service and tried to get everybody over on it, and it didn't work. So Buy Nothing groups, again, being a practice, are still basically operated as a thing inside of Facebook groups. And is that going to continue? Should that just move to WhatsApp? It's interesting to think about what the dynamics are there and how to get that off of Facebook, or what are the things again, it's a practice. So what do you need to do, and what's the critical mass that you need in order for that practice to survive somewhere else and to displace the existing practice?
It's so much of it is the habit stuff, and I think I think it is worth trying things again. I think there's a bunch of people, maybe like us, who get overly excited about things and then are excited about them maybe 15 years too early. One of the reasons, for example, that an attempt at an exodus from a Facebook Buy Nothing group to a new place might have just been that at the time, password managers weren't integrated into browsers. Right? It could have just been as simple as that, because there might have been, you might imagine an onboarding process that says, right, you can log in with Facebook to our new thing right now. And then after that, we will migrate your Facebook login to a login for this particular Buy Nothing group. And you don't even have to worry about a password anymore, because we can just use a passkey. It's just done.
Yeah, but Facebook still got the veto on that for whether or not they approve your app.
No, I mean that you once you create an account with Facebook, then you just throw the Facebook part away, and then you use that as a sub, and then you just create a new account you just migrate that to a new account on the Byte Nothing group.
Right, but Facebook
Right.
can still say you need an API key from Facebook in order to be able to do that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So Facebook
you
can
have
just say,
that.
yeah, we're not doing that. Sorry.
Yeah, they can stop doing it for you. Oh, right. So Dorian is saying like the stuff that hinges off Google spreadsheets. One of the canonical examples that I use is that DSAs are really, really good at using shared Google Docs to organize stuff in an emergency. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth thinking about. It's really easy to do. Most people have a Google account. You can do it anonymously. It's really useful to be able to see the massively multiplayer live document editing. Would we like it? Is it societally better to not have that as a Google Doc these days? Yes. So how easy can it be, and then how might that practice be preserved or spread or grow?
Right, and I think that some of that is threat modeling again, fundamentally, and also like what information is going away. Oh yeah, okay. CDRT is We can talk about sync another time. The other thing about this though is, and the thing I was going to say, and one of the examples that I've had in mind recently are things like Board Game Geek. And board game groups, which I'm a nerd. I go into board game shops. I went into one of the local board game shops while I was waiting for somebody, and realized that they had a local game section, which I'd never been in this store before. But I'm like, holy shit, that's fascinating. But like again, a thing that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And saw games there that I wouldn't have otherwise seen, and those are actually hooks into some of these other ecosystems, right? So how do you get people initially, and then how do you start to incrementally replace all of these things, I think is really the key element.
Yeah, it's like, so Board Game Geek, how do you get every board game onto...
Or it's not even, like, things can coexist with Board Game Geek. I think that that's okay. But
No. So absolutely coexisting, but how do you get that data onto PDS? Onto right?
That's the thing, right? I don't necessarily think that you need to. The same thing with like, do you need to replace IMDb? No, but like,
no.
Can we still talk about user behavior in conjunction with that? Absolutely. That's actually the thing that I think is interesting. So, yes. All right. Anybody else want to dial in?
Jackie, so we had someone on before. We had Nick Jarakinas on before, who also has a history as a game developer, and we were talking in game development, and we were talking back then about how and whether App Pro 2 is suited for a whole bunch of online games and MMOG infrastructure.
Yeah, I've continued that conversation a little bit with Nick, and that's one of those spaces that I think is going to be interesting, and I think worth demonstrating. And some of that actually neatly mirrors some of the things that like Streamplace does, right? Ultimately, this is a live stream of data being packaged and pushed across to a bunch of different folks all at the same time. Yeah. So this is all to say. We'd also love to hear folks who you would like to hear from too at the conference, because we've got a list of folks that we are reaching out to and we want to see engage in certain types of conversations. But if there are particular communities or types of folks that you're interested in hearing from, and I'll just use an example. Earlier this year, I helped to run a Protocols for Publishers conversation and invite a bunch of publishers to that, because I think it's worth saying, when everybody's worried about AI and the ways in which Google Zero is going to change the publishing business and so forth, but like, what are the ways in which people can respond? And one of those things is actually the protocol landscape and the ways in which user behavior is going to change and ways in which we can encourage that. So there are communities, everybody's thinking about what the future is going to look like right now. And I think it is worth engaging and having some of these conversations. What sorts of... So we're talking about media and civics, broadly speaking, but that can include anybody who is engaged in the elements that are critical to civic infrastructure, whether that is news publishing, whether that is actual governments, whether that is organizers, community organizers, or even political campaigns, are all folks who are interested and concerned about the information landscapes that we live and operate in, as well as the ways in which we are trying to connect and get things done together. Yes, Tynan, that is part of the and the theory that Dan and I have about this, and the reason why Dan was sort of expressing this as early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, is there was this whole class of like creative technologists who have been trying to figure out what we do with all of this technology and things that we can do to change society in fun and interesting ways. And people who are sort of carefully considering this. We're actually also seeing this right now with how AI gets used, particularly in software development. But like, how is technology changing our relationships and so forth, that I think is useful. Yep, I think that's right, Patrick.
What did Patrick say?
We should check in on the ACLU and see if they've stopped advertising on Facebook and X.
Yeah. Who needs to see what's happening here? Yeah. So again, on about who needs to see what's happening here. I think that, like Ted says, the people with the ability to direct or spend money to support building the stuff that we need, and that includes people at existing institutions or existing companies. So the flip side of that is being able to showing stuff that makes it as easy as possible for them to see the benefit in the ways that we talked about, like what stuff do you get for free on that, like either you get for free or that you had no idea that it was going to be this easy or this fast to integrate. Then the other thing will be people who can understand, not like, they don't have to be like really, really high level leaders, but the people who can persuade or influence the others, who can make decisions about policy, or can make decisions about regulation. So if it's someone who, we know is, technologically literate, or at least is kind of aligned in the right way, what kind of information, what would be helpful for them to see? Who would it be helpful for them to meet to be able to nudge an organization, in that proto direction?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why AtProto and the atmosphere is exciting and interesting is that there are folks who are one-man banding it, or are small groups, and so the Indian media ecosystem is interesting and exciting because of the fact that they are able to control their own destiny, although the resources that they're dealing with are not quite as large, but where there are interesting opportunities, they can pursue them directly. And so, like, I remember hearing this at the end of 2014, that there are indie creators who are like, yeah, one of the things about Blue Sky is that you can guarantee that if you post stuff, the people who follow you will see it, as opposed to places like X or Instagram, where it's really a crapshoot whether or not the stuff that you put out there will actually reach the people who have expressed interest. Yeah. So, Dan, what are you going to be doing over the next week or two?
I might also be doing another podcast with someone next Friday. I know.
The betrayal.
Yeah. And I've also started recording my workshops and stuff about helping tech teams work better.
Cool.
What else am I doing this weekend? I might be putting all the Christmas stuff away.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to do that here. I am currently 3D printing some components for a RC kit that my older kid and I are going to put together.
Nice.
and I am looking forward to getting some time to actually hack on some stuff, including trying to create a lexicon out of Apple News format content and see whether I can shunt that stuff over. So I'm looking forward to the coming week or two and all the stuff that's happening earlier in this year and the drumbeat up towards ATmosphereConf. So any other things that we should touch on before we wrap?
I think we might be.
Cool.
Yeah, the science community. Yeah, this has been fun.
Yep. It
Another
absolutely has.
one.
Yes. Excited about the At Science crew and the things that they're thinking about. We didn't talk about sovereign tech at all. And that's something that's maybe worth talking about. Actually, what we should do is get some of the Fiera Feeds folks on, like Ivan Seagal. So, yeah. Interesting ideas there. And Christian already left, but we should absolutely talk with him about some of the research questions in the space. So, yeah, that's a good idea. Liar. Thank you. Well, very cool. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks. And see you, of course, in the atmosphere.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. All right.